Genesis chapter 42. In Genesis 42, we find the story shifts between Canaan and Egypt. In chapter 42, you find Jacob telling his sons and say, "Hey, don't you know that there is food and grain in Egypt? Why don't you go and get some grain from there?" So we need to remember that, verse 57 of chapter 41. And all the countries came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph, because the famine was severe in all the world. So if you go to the history, the historians will tell you that there was really severe famine those 7 years in all over the world. Archaeology and history always complement the truths in the scripture. If there is something written in the scripture like Sodom and Gomorrah was burned down, so what do you think Christian archaeologists do? They go to the spot, they start digging. They find that there is sulfur underneath. And that's how they authenticate the through another channel. That is, one way is, see, we've never been to Sodom and Gomorrah, right? But we read the books. We read the scripture. As Christians, we believe whatever is written in the scripture. But there are certain people who say, I need extra proof. So the history adds to that. Or archaeology adds to it. Archaeology will never speak lies, is it not? Archaeology, because you cannot tamper with it. You cannot manipulate archaeological evidence. It's buried underneath. If there is a pot which came out, it came out. If there is a coin which came out, it came out. So therefore you cannot manipulate it. So here you find that there was this famine all over the world. And when this famine is all over the world, all the people went to Egypt to get the grain. Now what do you think is happening here? See, I want you to understand the sovereign hand of God. Joseph is in Egypt. What is the way by which he can meet his brothers and his family? What is the modus operandi by which God can bring this Joseph, who is in Egypt, and how can he bring this family together? You know what God used? He used famine. God used the same famine to exalt Joseph. See, there are certain things that man doesn't have control over, and the natural disasters. But there is somebody who can control these natural disasters and modulate in order to fulfill his purpose. Of all the people born on this earth, was there any star born when Jesus, like the way Jesus was born? Who can control the stars? You cannot. When Jesus died on the cross, there was an earthquake. When great things happen, supernatural things happen, I want you to remember something. God is in control. We heard in Texas and in Oklahoma, there was more than 60 days of 100 degrees plus past summer. When you had to water, the even numbers and odd number houses had to water according to the even and odd numbers. What do you think was happening? Did any of you think that God is in control? People put a question mark when there was an earthquake in Washington, D.C., which brought a crack on the monument, on the memorial. We need to have spiritual eyes. We need to look at things from a different standpoint, with a different perspective. That is where you can understand the way God is trying to build you and me. The world looks at it as what? Tectonic plates moving and there was an earthquake. How do you look at the same event as a Christian? Do you also say, yeah, the tectonic plates moved? Of course they moved. But now my question is, who moved the tectonic plates? So God used the famine to bring this family together. Is it not true in many families? In many families, there are people fighting in the family. Every family has a story. Yes? Every family has a story. But God could use one tragedy to bring people together. Maybe a death of one person in the family. Maybe sickness of somebody in the family. He brings the people together to Himself. God can use that natural disaster, that sickness, to bring people together. That's what we see here. Okay? Now Jacob asked his sons to go and bring food from Egypt. Then one thing he did not forget is, he remembered that last time he sent his sons like this, and he sent Joseph after them, Joseph never came back. So he's sending his 10 sons, but he's keeping Benjamin to himself. Why is he doing that? Because he is the son, the only son according to him, who's from his beloved wife, Rachel. So what does it mean? On the other side of it, he doesn't trust his sons. Right? See, the world always will judge you by your past. Listen to this carefully. The world will always judge you by your past. But God will always judge you based on your present. Because that present is in your hands. You have the choice to make whether you want to accept Jesus Christ or not. You cannot do anything before you were born, or you cannot do anything after you die. The only time you need to remember that you have a choice to make is on this earth, because once you make a choice here, what happens? Suppose, let's talk about believers. When you accepted Jesus Christ, what happens? You are in heaven. The moment you close your eyes here, you are in heaven. So God gives you an option. God gives you an option. And of course, in even that making that choice, He'll enable you. Right? That's what we read in Ephesians 2, 8 and 10. Now, therefore in Jude 24:25 he says, now unto Him who is able to keep you from falling and faultless before His throne. He is exceedingly joyful to present you like that. So ultimate picture of a person who believes in Jesus Christ is faultless. That happens when you take a decision on this earth. The world will always look at you based on your past. This man, Jacob, he remembers what his 10 sons did. They brought his coat of many colors and gave it to him and said, your son was killed by a wild beast. Therefore, Jacob is not trusting his sons. Okay? Please remember that this incident happened at least 13 years after the incident in Dothan, or the place where Jacob was sold to the Ishmaelites. This incident is happening after 13 years. I'll tell you how, okay? Now, Genesis 41:46 says, Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh. Okay? 30 years. Now, in 37th chapter of Genesis, you find Joseph was 17 years old. Right? So 30 minus 17 is 13 years. At least 13 years have passed. Now, he did not believe his own sons. And then they said, okay, we want to go. So these 10 sons went they went to Egypt to get some food. When they went to get some food, the person who was in charge of distributing food was Joseph. Okay? See where God placed him. God placed him at a place where he can meet some people, where he can connect. So therefore, this is what I believe. God has put you in a place where His mission for you will be fulfilled. You may have to go through a lot of troubles, just like Joseph did. He went to prison, he went through accusation, he went through lack of gratitude because of the butler who forgot him, got the benefit, never spoke about him. We can go through several situations, but ultimately what God is doing is, He brought Joseph to a place where people will come and see him. Just the way God used the Phaman. He was right there when people can come and see him. His brothers come and they see him. What happens there? Verse 8. Although Joseph recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. Why? They haven't seen him. That's first thing. Who would imagine that a Hebrew boy would be the top ruler of Egypt? He's Egyptian. His language is changed. He's now speaking Egyptian language using an interpreter. Who would imagine that he would be his brother? But you know what? He recognized all these people. He recognized all these people. They're all his brothers. And so what does he do? He just tries to play a little game with them. Yeah, he knows he wants to do the best for them, but he wants to play a little game. He says, hey, you're spies. You're spies. They say, no, sir, we are not spies. He said, you came to my country to see where we are weak. They said, no, sir, we are not weak. We're not spies. So he tries many different ways. And he says, put these fellows in the jail for 3 days. So on the third day, and he says, you need to go. And he asks them the history. The interesting thing about Joseph, what he does is, he tries to remember, Joseph is a very smart man. He's a very intelligent person. So what he does is, he tries to get information from these guys, from his own brothers, about his dad and his other brother. About all his family, he gathers information. He says, who are you? And they say, no, sir, we're not spies. We are so many people. My dad is, old. He's back home. He says, oh, okay, your dad is there, all right? And they said, yeah, we have one brother there. So he knows that brother is who? Benjamin. Then he says, bring that boy here. Bring that boy here. They said, no, sir, how can we do that? Yeah, already we had a tragedy in our family. We cannot. My dad will not let. He said, put these fellows inside the jail. He said, one of you go and bring him. One of you go and bring him. And after the third day, they all came out. So one of them, this is what, when they were brought out after the third day, look at the conversation here. Chapter 42, verse 21. They said to one another, surely we are being punished because of our brother. Who's this brother? Joseph. We saw how distressed he was when he pleaded with us for his life, but we would not listen. That's why this distress has come upon us. You remember what this boy did? He was pleading his brothers. He says, brothers, don't do this to me. Don't do this to me. Did they listen? No. So therefore now they're remembering what happened in the past. Reuben replied, didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? But you wouldn't listen. Now we must give an accounting for his blood. They did not realize that Joseph could understand them since he was using an interpreter. So these brothers have come to that realization. I want you to observe, in a short while from now, I want you to remember these 10 brothers. What happened to these brothers? Okay? Now, so what did they do? They all said, sir, we'll do one thing. You want one of them to go? Right? You want one of them to go and bring the brother? Let's not do that. Have one fellow here as a hostage, and we will all go and bring that boy. So Joseph says, agreed. Agreed. So, verse 27, at that place when they stopped for the night, one of them opened his sack to get feed for his donkey. What happened is, one of them, Simeon, is locked up, and the rest of them are gone. These people have gone. There's a lot of grain. They had enough grain for the silver they brought. And then, whatever money they paid, it was put back in their sack again. So what do you think happened here? They got free food. They got free food. And now they started going. And they opened the sacks and then they saw the silver there again. And then look at this, verse 28. My silver has been returned, he said to his brothers. Here it is in my sack. Their hearts sank and they returned to each other and turned to each other, trembling, and said, what is this that God has done to us? Is it really God who did that to them? See, now this is kind of what? This is leveling charges of stealing from the king. Is it not? You brought money. If you take this to the court, what happens? You brought the money, and now you have grain, but you should not have any silver with you. You should not have any money with you. But you have money with you and also grain. It means you stole. So there is evidence. You could be easily incriminated. So these people, now remember, please remember one thing. When you talk about Egypt those days, that's not the Egypt of today. Same country, same geographical location, but that Egypt we are talking about is a superpower. That's the time the pyramids were built. Even today people go to Egypt to see the pyramids. Great advanced country. Heard about the Egyptian civilization? My goodness. One of the greatest civilizations on the earth has been Egyptian civilization. Okay? Now here you find these people are feeling guilty now because they think we are now thieves. We have stolen something. So we could be easily caught. And that's why their heart sank. Okay, they came back home. They came back home and then they met their dad. And what is the news they bring to their dad? Dad, we need to take Benjamin out. What do you think Jacob would have said? I didn't send him, in the first trip itself I didn't send him because I know there's going to be trouble. So I want you to listen to this language that Jacob uses. Verse 36. 42:36. Their father Jacob said to them, "You have deprived me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more, and now you want to take Benjamin. Everything is against me." Joseph is gone, Simeon is gone, now you want to take Benjamin. Everything is against me. I want you to pause here in the last sentence which says, everything is against me. Have you been through those phases of life where you felt whatever you did was working against? Whatever you tried was all nullified. Everything is against you. We go through those situations in life. We all go through that. But you know what? God is so faithful. Our God is so faithful. Health issues, monetary issues. Sometimes people who are so good friends to us suddenly turn enemies to you. And you do everything possible, everything good, it all turns back to you. And then you say, I don't know why it's happening like this. Everything is against me. And this is where he reaches that point. I want you to remember a thread in this. These 10 brothers, when they opened the sacks, what did they say? What is this that God has done to us? Verse 28. Verse 36. Everything is against me. Chapter 43, verse 14. Last part. As for me, I am bereaved. I am bereaved. These are the sad moments in the life of this man. Please remember, sometimes you go through those phases. And I remember one man saying like this, Psalm 102, verses 6, 7, 8 and 9. Okay? Psalm 102, 6 to 9. This is what says, I am like a desert owl, like an owl among ruins. I lie awake. I have become like a bird alone on a roof. All day long my enemies taunt me. Those who rail against me use my name as a curse. For I eat ashes as my food and mingle my drink with tears. He says, I am like a bird alone on a roof. Those lonely moments. That period of isolation. Don't you think Joseph also went through these phases? He sure did. When he was in the pit, he was all alone. When he was sold to the Ishmaelites, probably they didn't even know his language. Just try to be around people who don't know your language. Yeah? Just try to be there and see what happens. We face that situation. In India, every state has a different language. So because of my dad's transfers, we had to go to another city. We went to another city. And there, we didn't find a church where people speak my language. They speak a local language, But we believe in that doctrine, and so we go there. We don't understand a word. Not a single word. We go there. Everything is so meaningless there. You want to be around people who can understand you, talk to you, say something to you. Lonely life. Look at Jesus Christ. He was also very lonely. John chapter 7, last verse says, everybody went to their house. John chapter 8, verse 1 says, he went to the Mount of Olives. He was a lonely person. But I tell you, those lonely moments are most powerful. They fashion you, they train you, they help you, they become great memories in your life. I remember when I was in Africa, 2001, I had no friends around me. I used to be in the office all alone, with tears in my eyes. I used to sing one song all the time. And that was, Lord, I don't have anybody around me. And therefore, to the top of my voice, all alone in the office, I would sing, what a friend we have in Jesus. Lonely moments, isolation process. We all go through that. But I tell you one thing, even in those moments, God has never left you. God will never leave you. So this is the assurance we have with our own experiences. With our own experiences. Okay, so Jacob says, everything against me is against me. And then, chapter 43, these people have to go back. Right? These people have to go back. Why? 2 reasons. One is, they have to redeem their brother Simeon. Secondly, they have to return the silver. Yes or no? They have to return the silver. And they have to redeem their brother Simeon. Where is Simeon now? Simeon is in Egypt. He's in the prison in Egypt. Because with that assurance, he allowed these other brothers to go and see their father. So Simeon is in the prison, and they have to return this silver back to the king. That is, let's put it like this, Joseph. Okay. Now these people decide to go. Now this time they have to take Benjamin with them, and Jacob is not willing to let this boy go. There's one man who steps up, one of the sons of Jacob. He steps up and says, "Hey, Dad, you have to do this. You have to do this." And he says, my sons will be a guarantee. If I don't bring Benjamin alive, you can take my sons in his place. I will carry the guilt and the blame before you all my life. Verse 8, chapter 43, verse 8. Then Judah said to Israel his father, "Send the boy along with me, and we will go at once, so that we and you and our children may live and not die. I myself will guarantee his safety. You can hold me personally responsible for him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him here before you, I will bear the blame before you all my life." The question I want to ask you is, why Judah? Why Judah? To understand why Judah came forward, you have to go back to chapter 37. In chapter 37, verse 26 to 28, this is what you find. When he was thrown in the pit, when Joseph was thrown in the pit, verse 26, Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. So the Midianite merchants came by. Brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. Whose idea was it of selling Joseph to the foreigners? Judah. Judah is now stepping up. He realized what he did. He is acknowledging, not publicly, his mistake. And therefore, you find this man says, "Dad, I and my children, we are responsible. I am responsible for this. Yeah? I myself will guarantee his safety." Okay? So, Then what happens is Jacob tells his boys, hey, take double the amount of silver this time. Verse 12. Take double the amount of silver with you, for you must return the silver that was put back into the mouths of your sacks. Perhaps it was a mistake. This is a very, very important characteristic of a man of God. You know what? Or a woman of God. You need to remember, what you find here in Jacob is sincerity and honesty. Sincerity and honesty. You know, if you got the grain, you took the money with you, but somebody put the money back in your sack, you took the grain, what would many people do? Keep it. Keep the money. Jacob says, no, don't do that. Take this money back and give it to them and say, sir, you gave us extra money. That is where Christians' honesty and loyalty is seen. Have you ever got extra cash from the register at Walmart? Yeah? Sometimes they make a mistake. They make a mistake. So what do you do? What do you do? How many people, how many believers, how many Christians do that? That's the question. I don't think so. You know, by going back to that person and telling him, sir, you gave me extra money, this is it. Just check how much it is. How much did you give me? You know what? You establish, a witness. You create a witness. You are able to witness to that person. And at the end of it, you say, I'm accountable to God one day. One day I'm accountable to God. I got money several times. They ring it wrong. They ring it wrong. This is expensive, but they ring it wrong. So there were occasions where I would stand up and say, hey sir, just check, scan it again. Scan it again. Oh, I'm sorry. You know what answers you get from people? The people working at the register. So you're so unique. Not everybody does that. Not everybody does that. That's why I said, you get extra money, you take it and go away.
I gave one lady from London, England. She came to India and she lost her purse. The passport, lots of money had. You know? I returned.
So this shows your honesty, your sincerity, integrity. Say, I'll get what I'm supposed to. I'll pay you how much I have to pay. I don't want extra. It was your mistake. You know what happens at the end of the day? If you don't give the money, that person has to pay from his own pocket. Right? And you don't want to be responsible for that. I'll tell you what God does, you know. God is so interested in us, in His children. I want to read a verse for you. He says, when somebody wants to sleep and they don't find their comforter, let me put it in today's language. If you take another person's comforter and you don't return it to that person by night, God will hold you responsible. Let me read from Exodus 22 and 26. If you take your neighbor's cloak as a pledge, return it to him by sunset, because his cloak is the only covering he has for his body. What else will he sleep in? When he cries out to me, I will hear, for I am compassionate. Can you think about that? You take somebody's comforter and you don't give it to him back by sunset, and that night that man sleeps without the comforter and he says, oh my God, this is so cold. God has heard that cry there. And God will hold you responsible. Would God do things for such a silly thing? Yes. Yes. So we need to be very careful. The money matters with the Christians is a very dangerous thing. Many people, now this is a tax season, right? Tax season. What do people do? Try to manipulate and try to avoid paying tax to the government. And what is the answer they give? What is the answer some people give? Oh, the government is cheating us. What's wrong in me cheating the government? What did Jesus say? Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. Give to God what belongs to God. It's your responsibility to be a very law-abiding citizen, being an honest citizen. You can stand up and say, I paid my taxes faithfully, without manipulation. Okay? Right. Now please remember that Jacob is teaching these boys our great lesson here. It says, take double the silver and pay him back. Perhaps it was a mistake. Okay? These people come and see Joseph. They again come back to, this is a second visit to Egypt. Now this time who is there? Benjamin is there. This time they brought the youngest of them all, Benjamin. Now they went to Joseph. And he said, so they went up to Joseph's steward. What they did is, they went to Joseph's steward and said, sir, this is what happened. We got the extra money in our sacks when we were going back. So we now come to return this money. I want you to listen to this man's answer. Verse 23. Verse 23. It's all right. He said, don't be afraid. Your God, the God of your father, has given you treasure in your sacks. I received your silver. Then he brought Simeon out to them. Did you hear the answer of this Egyptian steward? Egyptian steward. What is he saying? God, your God, has given you treasure in your sacks. The question I have is, how does this Egyptian steward know about the God of Israel? The reason is Joseph. Now, so do you see God's plan? In taking this man to the palace in Egypt, from the jail, from the prison to the palace, he's in the palace. You know what? He changed his name. Do you know that he changed his name? Joseph's name was changed. He married a girl from that country. He learned their language. He understood their customs and everything. But he did not leave his God. Do you remember Bible said, chapter 39, God was with Joseph. God was with Joseph in the prison. God was with Joseph in Potiphar's house. God was with Joseph. Now you find this man's testimony. Man all alone in a different country, a very strange atmosphere. None of them watching him. He could have easily become an Egyptian. He could have easily practiced the practices of the Egyptians. Instead of that, he is presenting his God to the people around him. Such an important lesson we need to learn. Wherever you go, you don't abandon your God. You don't leave your God. It's very easy to be carried away with the customs of a new place. Who cares? Who's watching us? Yeah, who's watching us? This is what the question is. And these people, they realized, that God put a testimony in the Egyptian palace in the form of Joseph. What a great thing it would be to see an Egyptian steward praising God. Right there. Right? He says, your God has given you the treasure. And he says, what? I received your silver. I received your silver. So what is that? So Jacob said, perhaps it was a mistake. Was it really a mistake? No. It was not a mistake, but it was a reward. They got the reward back. Okay, Simeon came out. And now, as we said, Joseph sees his family after 13 years. So when they see him, they're supposed to eat lunch in the evening, okay? Lunch in the afternoon with him. Verse 26, when Joseph came home, they presented to him the gifts they had brought into the house. And they bowed down before him to the ground. What do you think is happening here? Joseph's dream is fulfilled. It's coming true. All the stars bowed down to the sun. All the stalks of grain bowed down to one of the stalks. That is all these brothers bowing down to. Do you think God can do things like that? Unimaginable things. Really, if you study the life of Joseph, you'll be so thrilled and say, Lord, how can you exalt such a fellow to such a big position? And then his own brothers come and fall prostrate before him. They bow down to him. Okay? They bowed down to him. Again they did that. So this time, he said, okay, now let's go and eat. Now they're eating. Now when they're eating, there's something astonishing happening here. Verse 33. The men had been seated before him in the order of their ages, from the firstborn to the youngest, and they looked at each other in astonishment. What do you mean? Why were they astonished?
If they knew what order to be placed in.
This is the exact order in which they used to eat at home. So now they're surprised, like, man, this is something strange. You know, have you seen some families where you're invited for lunch or dinner? There are some specific spots for some people. Okay, in I don't know if it's a practice here also. The head of the family will sit at the end of the table, like Thanksgiving. That's reserved. And then the rest of the family. And there was a custom. There was a pattern in which they used to sit, the oldest and then the youngest. When they sat like this, they thought, there's something strange here. Yeah? How can this practice be here? And do they have the same practice with just like us? So that's why they were astonished. You know, Joseph is trying to reveal himself to his brothers slowly, and slowly. Did you get that? He's trying to reveal, I'll show you there. He's slowly revealing himself to his brothers. Okay? Now chapter 44. In chapter 44, you find that these people had their food, and after they had their food, they are being sent back. So, again, they bought that food, and they got the grain, they were going. And as they were going, you know what Joseph did? He said, take my cup. They came for lunch, right? So take my cup and put it in the sack of Benjamin. Put it in the sack of Benjamin and let them go. So after these brothers started going, you know, this Joseph sent a soldier and said, go after them, and my cup is in one of the sacks. Go and catch these fellows. So this soldier goes, and then he goes and stops these people and says, hey, you are really thieves. You are really thieves. You stole from the palace. The king brought you, Joseph brought you and gave you such a big honor. You ate with that man, and now you are trying to do what? You stole from the palace? Shame on you. They were shocked and said, did we really? So then one of them said, what? Whoever has stolen will be put to death. Verse 9. 44 verse 9. If any of your servants is found to have it, he will die, and the rest of us will become my Lord's slaves. Okay? Now the soldier is searching. And whose sack was it found? Benjamin. Now what happens? Now what do you think the first thought that came to their mind? My goodness, this is what we didn't want. Now Benjamin, if he takes away Benjamin, if he kills Benjamin there, then that old man will die there. So they start pleading him. So what do they do? Verse 13. At this they tore their clothes, they all loaded their donkeys and returned to the city. Now see, they came to Joseph. And listen to this. Joseph is trying to reveal himself slowly. Verse 15. Joseph said to them, what is this you have done? Don't you know that a man like me can find things out by divination? Joseph is called the dreamer. So he said, don't you think a man like me? So there is a string which is running, but these people are so blinded, they're not able to understand. And then these people come up and say, Judah went up. Judah went up to him. Verse 18, and said, please my Lord, let your servant speak a word to my Lord. And he tells his story. He tells what happened, what they did to their younger brother. How his dad was so disappointed. They said, "Sir, this boy whom you want to, in whose bag this cup was found, if he doesn't go back home, my old father will die. He's already lost one son. And if he loses this boy, he will surely die." Verse 33, "Now then please let your servants remain here, and as my Lord's slaves, in place of the boy, and let the boy return with his brothers. How can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? No, do not let me see the misery that would come upon my father." I want to tell you something. Through these experiences, God brought a change in the 10 brothers. These same people, these same brothers, had treated Joseph so bad. They put him in a cistern. They put him in a cistern without water. They sold him 20 pieces of shekels of silver. After 13 years, God made them realize what they did. You know what they're doing now? They're ready to risk their lives for their brother. The same people who sold a brother are now ready to risk their lives for their brother. You know, this is what is Christianity, where you can lay your life on the plate for another brother. Christianity is not all to yourself. When the cruise liner was sinking, what do you think people were doing? Were they trying to be generous and allow one person to take the lifeboat and go? "Sir, please go, I'll wait." Do you think they were trying to do? No. Listen to the reports. "I want to protect myself. I don't care what happens to you. I want to jump in. People might pull and push. I want to get into the lifeboat. I don't care what happens." Churches and Christianity is not built on that. Christianity is built on the foundation that Jesus said, "I will die for you, and in your place I will lay my life." A good shepherd will lay down his life. That is the example that Jesus gave to us. What a great fellowship that would be. If one person is in trouble, somebody comes up and says, "You can punish me instead of him." Do we find people today? Unfortunately, in Christendom today, we find situations like in a war. In a war, what happens? You protect yourself. You don't think about protecting the other person. Your priority is that, look at that captain. I'm so surprised. When you hear the story of the Titanic, the captain was the last man. He said, "I'm not getting out. I will die with the ship. I will die with the ship." And now look at this man. I think it's because it's a cruise. This man, he abandoned. He got orders and said, "Come on, go. See what's happening around." He's not moving. What happens there? Selfishness. Selfishness. I want to protect myself. I want to protect myself. These brothers who were so bad that they sold their brother once upon a time, now they are ready to risk their lives. When Joseph saw this change in his brothers, you know what he did? Chapter 45. Chapter 45, verse 1. Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all his attendants, and he cried out, "Have everyone leave my presence." So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. I tell you, there's one good lesson that we can learn from here. The more we humble ourselves, the closer we can be in fellowship with one another. The more you become proud, what happens to Satan? He was proud. What happened? He was thrown down. When we humble ourselves before God, we come so close to God. When we humble ourselves before another brother, another sister, and we esteem one more than the other, that's where the great and pleasant fellowship comes in. Here you find this brother had every right. Tell me one thing. Does Joseph have every right to execute all of them? Yes. Whatever he says will happen. That's what Pharaoh said. But this man comes. When he saw the change in the brothers, he could not control himself. He burst out. He cried. Pharaoh heard that these people who had come, these 11 boys who had come, they were the brothers of Joseph. I want you to understand what Joseph spoke to his brothers. What did Joseph say to his brothers? Verse 5, chapter 45, verse 5. And now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. What a forgiving nature. You remember that? It's a great forgiving nature. God sent me here. He didn't say, you fellows sold me. Yeah, if we had a family reunion, and this is what you would say, right? If you were Joseph, and there's a family reunion. Of course, Dad's not here. But a family reunion, what would he say? You fellow. Yeah, Reuben is okay. But Judah, you fellow, you sold me to the Ishmaelites. That was your idea. See what God's done to me now? You see? You are bowing down to Him. He didn't bring up all that. Nothing. He said, brothers, you know what? If this happened during this time, you know what he would say? And he was a believer, and he was a Christian, and Joseph would have said, what? I want you to go home and check Romans 8:28. What's that? All things work together for the good of those that love Him. He would have said that. But here you see, he says, brothers, don't be distressed. God sent me here ahead of you. What a forgiving nature. What a different perspective. For 2 years now, verse 6, for 2 years now there has been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years there will not be plowing and reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on the earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. Verse 8, so then it was not you who sent me here, but God. God sent me here. Can we say that? Can we say that? And say, whatever hurt you tried to do, you know what, brother? You know what? God had a plan for that. And would you be able to forgive that person? A great forgiving nature that you find. What did Jesus say on the cross? Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Did Jesus come back and say, hey, when He rose again, you know what a human mind would do is, when He rose again, you know what He would say? Go to the same fellow who pierced His side and say, hey, come here. Come here, fellow. You pierced my side, right? Yeah? The soldiers who beat Him with those lashes, He could have said, what did you fellows do? You beat me with the lashes. Pontius Pilate, you did this, right? Hey, you did this, you did this, you did this. Did Jesus ever do that? No. He's not an accusing God. He's a forgiving God. That's the nature that you find here in Joseph. And see, everything turned out for the good. And so then these boys were excited and said, yes, our brother is alive. So they go back home. And Pharaoh comes and sees his brothers. He sees his brothers. And then, what does Pharaoh do? Verse 20, 45:20. Never mind about your belongings, because the best of all Egypt will be yours. The best of all Egypt will be yours. You know what's the land they got? We'll find that later. They found a place called Goshen. They settled in the land of Goshen in Egypt. So here you find that this man is encouraging them to go back home and bring their father. So all these people, they go back home this time. And when they go back home, this is what happens. They went and told Jacob, what? That their brother is alive. Their brother is alive. Do you think Jacob believed them? Because fellows, 13 years back you came and told me that he died. You brought his coat of many colors and the wild beast ate him, killed him, and now you come and tell me that he is alive? Obviously you won't believe it. So what happened?